They say nothing lasts forever. Even so, some things try. This is one such story. Born as lightning struck the earth and rain drummed the rooftops like war drums. The village doctor watched her writhe in agony for 3 days as her insides fought to surrender. But still, she lived. The bottle was discovered beneath her bed. She moved like wind between walls, a presence rather than a person. That was when the hanging happened. There was no trial, no sentence read aloud, only a sudden, silent gathering. Some claimed she cursed a newborn. When lightning struck the chapel and fire devoured the altar, no one blamed the heavens, they blamed her breath. Still, Erzsébet remained, quiet, hollow-eyed, unbroken. Others swore she was seen speaking to skulls beside the river. The magistrate himself tied the rope. Her feet danced above the earth for what felt like hours. Then, stillness. They buried her beneath a willow tree. But before the last stone was placed, she opened her eyes. She had not died. Its label scratched away. They feared what it meant when she didn't. Next came the glass. Someone had ground it finely and hidden it in her bread. She swallowed it unknowingly. Her mouth bled. Lightning cracked the sky, a jagged mirror to her soul. Rain fell like judgment. Thunder boomed her name across the mountains. That night, the clouds parted, revealing a face in the stars, a harbinger of endings. And in the hearth of the oldest house, a single ember glowed where before there was none. That night, the air grew thick. Shadows stretched like grasping claws. And at the stroke of midnight, Erzsébet Carvosa died. Finally, death had come for her, and this time even the mountains could not hide her. From its embrace, her spirit, no longer tethered to flesh, fled to the waiting storm. The villagers watched, huddled and breathless, as lightning claimed her form and the thunder swallowed her whole. When the first rays of sun touched the horizon, they found her in the village square, a husk beneath the willow tree. Her skin was the color of old parchment, her eyes to bottomless pools reflecting the leaden sky, her lips a silent scream frozen in the pale dawn. They buried her beneath the crosses, deeper this time, as if to seal her in the earth's cold heart. But even in death, the earth refused to keep its hold, for when they returned to lay her to rest, her coffin was empty, and with it, their fears were laid to rest. Or perhaps they simply learned to live with the echoes of what might have been. After all, how do you bury immortality? Her body grew weak, yet again she endured. When the doctor examined her, he trembled. Her heart, he muttered, beats like it belongs to 3. Then the drowning. One cold night, she was taken, no trial, no procession, just ropes, stones, and silence. The lake was calm, they say she sank without a cry for 2 days. She was gone. But on the 3rd, a shepherd found her curled in the reeds, wet, shaking, eyes unblinking. No one was punished. No one spoke of it. Not with violence, but with time. She was sealed in the cellar of the abandoned mill house. Bricks closed in the door. No food. No water. No light. Only silence and stone. She stayed there 21 days. When the door was finally opened, they expected bones. Instead, she stood gaunt, ghost-like, her hair white as bone ash, her fingernails curled like bark. She did not speak, but she lived. They only watched her more cautiously, as if her existence disturbed something sacred and old. Her mother, a Romani healer long feared for her strange ways, did not survive the birth. Her final cry was lost to the thunder. Erzsébet's first breath was taken in blood and storm. The villagers called it a bad omen. They were not wrong. By the age of 12, she had already survived 2 fires. The first consumed her family's cottage while she slept. The second burned the granary where she'd sought shelter. Flames clung to her like jealous ghosts, yet she walked from both ruins scarred but breathing. Her back bore marks like frost-bitten lace white, fragile, permanent. The priest called her God's stubborn child. The midwives whispered that she was a thread the fates tried to cut, then tied back with trembling hands. In the deep folds of the Carpathian Mountains, where fog lingers like forgotten sorrow, there once lived a woman named Erzsébet Carvosa. Her name has been carefully erased from every record, but not from the whispers that drift between the pine trees, or from the stories carried by the old wind. Some say she was born under a curse. Others believe she defied something older than death. But all agree on one thing: Ursibit simply would not die. The hay was soaked crimson, but the wound missed its mark. She crawled from the shadows, blood pouring from her throat, her eyes wide but dry. The priest who found her crossed himself again and again. Marek vanished before nightfall, his fate never spoken aloud. She came into the world beneath a broken sky. At 16, her tea was laced with nightshade. When she was 19, a man named Marek, some say a lover, others say a brute, attacked her behind the chapel. His blade found her neck. By 23, Ursibit had become less woman, more apparition. From that day forward, the villagers no longer feared her dying. From that day, children were forbidden to speak her name. Crosses were hammered tighter into walls. At night, shutters were sealed with wax. They tried again, and then came the 9th. It was not a season nor a Sunday, but a reckoning. Ah, hello there, hello there. No savior was coming. This time it was different. The villagers knew what they had to do. They just weren't sure how. It started subtly, like the creeping rot of an old house. He lived alone in a shack outside the village, shunned and pitied. His father had been the blacksmith, his mother the innkeeper. His skin was marred by scars, his mind by whispers. No one knew why the woman wanted him, only that she did. So they brought him, hesitant and scared. They led him into the clearing, past the circle of villagers and to the foot of a massive oak. Its roots snaked across the grass, its branches clawed at the sky. There it hung. First, the animals went missing, then the crops. Soon, even the river seemed to shrink beneath the sun. Deliberate and communal, the elders, who had grown wrinkled watching her defy nature, convened beneath the bell tower. They wore black, though no one had yet died. They lit candles, though no prayer was spoken. They agreed on one final act. It had to be righteous. It had to be final. They summoned a man called Grigor. He came from the south, from the hills where wolves still answered the moon. Grigor was a killer by profession, a whisperer of poisons and fire. But he was also, as they described him, a man of reason, the kind who could kill without cruelty, only precision. He asked no questions. He requested no names, just a room and a scent. He watched her for 3 days. No one warned her. By then, Ursibit had stopped fearing death. Her skin sagged on her bones. Her eyes had the patience of the dead. She walked each day to the chapel ruins, sat beside the charred altar, and stared into the ash. When the wind blew, she inhaled it. Grigor waited. He chose his moment, carefully. On the 4th night, he approached her as she lay in the grass behind the graveyard. The moon cast no shadow, only a quiet frost. He knelt beside her, spoke nothing, and pressed a needle into her neck. A venom from the south, slow and clever, designed to halt the heart in silence. She never flinched. As her limbs stilled and her eyes rolled back, she met his gaze and whispered something he would never repeat. Her last breath was not a gasp but a smile. It lingered long after her body cooled. They buried her the next morning beneath a willow tree, wrapped in linen, her eyes gently closed. The town exhaled. Children danced again. The well water tasted sweet. But that peace is rarely honest. Grigor did not leave. He stayed silent, pale, haunted. They found him weeks later, hanging from the same tree. A note pinned to his chest read, "She watches me in my dreams." And then the strange things began. A raven perched on the chapel ruins, unmoving. Dogs refused to pass the graveyard. Infants screamed at dusk and laughed at shadows. A fog settled in the fields that never lifted. One by one, the townspeople whispered of footsteps on rooftops, of breath on windows, of a woman's silhouette in the river. Some left. Others stayed, too poor or too proud. But all agreed that Ursibit was gone. Until the midwife vanished. She had delivered Ursibit's stillborn brother the night of her mother's death. A quiet woman, always kind. And yet, one morning she was gone, her house empty, her mirror cracked. In its place, carved into the wall, were 9 tool marks, like fingernails. Soon after, the blacksmith drowned in his tub. The school teacher fell down a flight of stairs with no railing. The baker choked on a stone baked into his own loaf. Each had been there at the hangings. Each had helped. Each death came without witnesses. Without screams, only the feeling that justice had folded its wings around the town. Some began to pray again. Others dug up Erzsébet's grave, but it was empty. The linen lay there, undisturbed. The ground around it smelled faintly of ash and wet earth. A single word was scratched into the inside of the casket lid, enough, and still no answer came, leaving cracked mud where children had once splashed. Then came the dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but visits from a woman who always wore grey, sometimes green. The villagers awoke shivering, whispering, questioning. What did it mean? How should they prepare? The elders, faces knotted with worry, decided they had to know more. Would you look at that? It's another one of your requested stories, this time from our good old friend Jed. This story, much like our budget, is brought to you by Night King. This time there was no hero. That's when they sent for her. She lived in the hills, a solitary woman in a cottage woven from twigs and memories. They hadn't even confessed to their sins in the hopes she'd absolve them. No, they were here because they had failed. They had failed the girl. They had failed themselves. They had failed the very notion of a life worth living. What must we do? They begged to bring her back. The woman didn't answer right away. She studied their faces, their slumped shoulders, their fearful eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded like stones tumbling down a hillside. Bring me the boy. No one entered her woods, not since the girl had vanished and turned the river red. No one knew how old the woman was, only that she spoke with the wind and understood the language of ravens. The villagers found her, sitting cross-legged in a clearing. Sunlight dripped through the leaves, dappling her gnarled hands. Hands that had known both hunger and the warmth of a hearth. Her eyes were as green as moss, her hair the color of dried blood. She didn't welcome them. She didn't need to. She already knew why they had come. She already knew what they wanted to hear. Theirs wasn't a cruel village. They hadn't driven the woman out. They hadn't snapped and devoured the girl. He was an unlikely candidate, barely 10 years old. It wasn't an individual this time, not a villager or a misguided priest. It was a decision. Years passed. Seasons cycled through their predictable cruelties. The midwife, a newcomer. The villagers called it coincidence. They always did. Ilka grew fast. Her eyes were cold blue. 3 days later, she returned, mud-streaked, barefoot and calm. She said nothing, but behind her, 9 crows followed. They sat in the trees like mourners. That night, the willow tree cracked in half, though the wind was still. They paraded through the streets, laughing and singing. But after 3 days, the laughter faded, the crops failed. Livestock died. Winter came early and stayed too long. Spring refused to bloom, summer wilted in the fields, autumn rotted before it ripened. The earth itself seemed to weep. Then Ilka returned. The people fell silent. She walked into the town square. The mayor stepped forward, his face etched with forced calm. "Leave," he said, "and don't come back. We won't stop you this time." She smiled then, a slow, sad smile. The first crack in the dam. Tears welled in her eyes. The second. "You never wanted me here," she whispered, and the dam broke. She cried out, "Why do you fear me?" The people flinched, but no one answered. She was their fear made flesh, and facing their own darkness, they found no words. Ilka screamed until she had no voice left. Then she did something they never expected. She prayed. She prayed for mercy, for understanding, for forgiveness. She prayed for them, and as the last syllable of her last prayer died on her lips, the sun broke through the clouds. It was the first time in months that light had touched the town. Hope, fragile as a newborn bird, fluttered in Ilka's chest. But the people only saw a witch praying. They reached for stones. The mayor threw the first one. Other followed, bouncing off her shields, harmless. The sky cracked. Thunder roared. Lightning split the earth. The people screamed and scattered. And when the storm passed, Ilka was gone. They found her by the river, kneeling beside a grave. She was whispering to someone, or something, buried beneath the cold mud. "Don't be afraid," she murmured. "I am here now." The people wanted to destroy the grave, to desecrate the remains, but their hands trembled. Something about the girl's quiet strength frightened them, so they left her be. but not before dropping curses on the grave. Ilka rose, brushing mud from her skirts. She turned, her eyes blazing, and the people fell to their knees. This time, there would be no escape, no running away. This time, she would make them understand, or die trying. The town could no longer deny it. Erzsébet had never died. She had simply waited to be reborn or remembered, or maybe both. Some say she was a witch, others a martyr. But in quiet corners, far from firelight, some whisper that she was something older, not a demon, not a ghost, just a truth too cruel for daylight. A woman not allowed to live, a soul not permitted to rest, a name erased, not forgotten. They tried to kill her 9 times and she survived them all. But survival, as it turns out, is not the end of a story, it's only the beginning. Her skin, deathly pale. Animals followed her, and fires, strange, unprovoked fires, seemed drawn to her touch. At night, the whispers returned. Some swore. They saw Erzsébet walking through Ilka's shadow. Others said Ilka was Erzsébet, reborn with cleaner hands. The priest refused to baptize her. The baker closed his shop. A quiet fear bloomed again, gentle as mold. Children grew. Elders died. The town renamed itself. It repainted its signs and it burned the old church to the ground. A new chapel was built of white stone, bright windows, polished floors, no memory. But legends are not things you bury. They are infections. A girl born during a thunderstorm, just like Erzsébet, was named Ilka. Her mother died in childbirth. One afternoon, Ilka disappeared. She didn't need the whispers anymore. She was their queen now. The townspeople called her meetings. They begged her to leave. Ilka looked at them with eyes the color of a winter sky, bottomless and cold. She knew what they wanted. She was their sacrifice, their appeasement, their way to bargain with the darkness that lived inside her. Maybe she would have left if they had asked her nicely, but their voices dripped with fear and loathing. So she stayed. She watched them cower and she savored it. For 15 years, she endured their terrified gaze and their desperate pleas. And then one day she tired of being their monster. She left town without a backward glance. The people rejoiced.